Okay, so I want to tell you about a monkey that weighs about 4 kilograms. 4 kilograms? That's roughly the size of a large house cat. In the primate world, that's tiny. That's the kind of size that should mean you stay quiet, stay hidden, don't draw attention to yourself, and definitely don't challenge animals twice your size. This monkey does none of those things. It uses tools in ways that took humans thousands of years to figure out. It understands the concept of fairness and will actively protest when it's treated unfairly. It has been documented deceiving other members of its group for personal gain. It figures out puzzles that leave much larger primates completely stumped. And in research settings, it has learned to use tokens as a form of currency, and then, almost immediately, started cheating the system. It is 4 kilograms of pure cognitive chaos, and it might be the most underestimated animal on this entire channel. The Capuchin monkey. Let's talk about it. Hey, welcome back to Primal Mind. So if you've been with us for a while, you know we've been working our way through the great apes. Chimps, gorillas, orangutans, bonobos. Big, impressive animals with big, impressive brains. And all of that has been genuinely fascinating. But today we're doing something a little different. Today we're going small. Because sometimes the most remarkable cognitive story in the room is not the biggest animal in the room. Sometimes it's the one in the corner that everyone underestimated. Capuchins are not great apes. They're New World monkeys, living in Central and South America, completely separate evolutionary lineage from the African and Asian primates we've been covering. They diverged from our shared primate ancestor tens of millions of years ago. And yet, the cognitive abilities they've independently developed, the tool use, the social intelligence, the understanding of fairness, the capacity for deception, overlap with abilities we thought were exclusive to the great apes, to the animals closest to us. That overlap is not a coincidence. It's one of the most important stories in cognitive science, and it starts with a stone. So here's something that genuinely surprised researchers when they first documented it properly. Wild capuchins in Brazil use stone tools, not in a simple, occasional way, in a systematic, culturally transmitted, technically sophisticated way that researchers describe as the most complex tool use ever documented outside the great apes and humans. They select specific stones for specific tasks, heavier stones for cracking harder nuts, different surfaces for different materials. They transport tools to the location where they're needed. They position the nut precisely on a flat stone anvil before striking. The whole sequence requires planning, spatial reasoning, and a level of motor control that is genuinely impressive for any animal. And here's the part that really gets me. They teach it. Not explicitly, the way a human teacher would. But juveniles watch adults, practice on their own, fail repeatedly, and gradually develop the skill over months and years. The technique is culturally transmitted across generations. Different capuchin populations have developed different tool use traditions, regional variations, like dialects, that persist because young animals learn from the adults around them. This is not instinct. You cannot instinctively learn a specific regional technique from watching others. This is social learning, cultural transmission. In a 4-kilogram monkey with a brain the size of a lemon. If you didn't already know capuchins could do this, you're not alone. Drop a comment. I want to know how many people had no idea this was happening. Okay, so now we get to the experiment that made capuchins famous in cognitive science circles. And honestly, it's one of my favorite studies in all of animal psychology. You might have heard of it. 2 capuchins, side by side in adjacent enclosures where they can clearly see each other. Both doing the same simple task, handing a researcher a small stone in exchange for a food reward. For the first few rounds, both get cucumber. Fine. They accept it, eat it, no complaints. Then one of them starts getting grapes. Grapes are significantly better than cucumber in capuchin terms. The other one is still getting cucumber. The cucumber monkey watches this happen. Then it gets its cucumber. It throws the cucumber back at the researcher. Sometimes it rattles the enclosure. Sometimes it just stares with what can only be described as profound offense. Now, this experiment became famous because of what it suggests about the capuchin's cognitive and emotional life. This animal is not just hungry. It is not just reacting to a negative stimulus. It is comparing its outcome to another individual's outcome, finding the comparison unfair, and expressing something that functions like moral outrage. It has a sense of what it is owed, relative to others. In a specific social context, Franz de Waal, who ran versions of this experiment, argued that this is the behavioral and emotional foundation of the human sense of fairness. Not something humans invented, something that was already present millions of years before us in the primate brain. And a 4-kilogram New World monkey just demonstrated it in a lab in Atlanta. So we've established that capuchins understand tools and fairness. Now let's talk about something a little more uncomfortable. They lie. Not in the complex, language-based way humans lie, but in the behavioral sense, they deliberately create false impressions in the minds of other group members to gain personal advantage. And they're quite good at it. Field researchers have documented capuchins giving false alarm calls. The vocalization that normally signals a predator is nearby, in situations where no predator is present but a desirable food source is. The call scatters the group. The capuchin that made the call goes straight for the food. This requires a theory of mind, the understanding that other individuals have beliefs, and that those beliefs can be influenced through your behavior. The capuchin is not just reacting, it is modeling what other monkeys will do in response to a specific signal, and using that model strategically. We've talked about deception in chimps and monkeys on this channel before, but capuchins doing it is somehow more striking to me, because they evolved this capacity completely independently, on a different continent, in a completely separate evolutionary lineage. The fact that social deception emerged in capuchins and in the great apes independently suggests something important, that in a complex social environment, the cognitive tools for social manipulation are not a quirk. They are an almost inevitable outcome. Intelligence, it turns out, does not always go in the direction we'd like. Hit the like button if that thought is sitting uncomfortably with you, because honestly, it should. Okay, this is the one. This is the experiment that I think about more than almost any other piece of animal research I've come across. Researchers at Yale taught capuchins to use tokens, small metal discs, as currency. The monkeys learned that tokens could be exchanged with researchers for food. Different foods had different prices. The capuchins learned to budget, to choose, to trade. They had, in other words, learned the basic concept of money. And then, almost immediately, they started doing things with this knowledge that nobody anticipated. They figured out that stealing tokens from other capuchins and then trading them was more efficient than earning them. Token theft became common. One male was documented giving a token to a female, which initially confused researchers until they realized what was happening. He had figured out that giving resources to others could generate social returns. He had independently invented the concept of spending money to build social relationships. And in at least one documented case, a capuchin was caught stealing a whole tray of tokens and then selectively distributing them, hoarding the majority, giving some away strategically. It had grasped, without being taught, that controlling the supply of currency gives you social power. I want to be careful here. These are fascinating behaviors, but they require cautious interpretation. We're not saying capuchins understand economics the way humans do. But the fact that introducing a token economy into a capuchin group immediately produced behaviors that mirror some of the most fundamental human economic instincts. That's extraordinary, and it says something about where those instincts actually come from. So why did a small New World monkey develop cognitive abilities that rival the great apes? The ecological answer involves their diet. Capuchins are omnivores. They eat fruit, insects, small vertebrates, nuts, and pretty much anything else they can get. This dietary flexibility requires more cognitive flexibility than a specialized diet does. Finding food when your food sources are varied and unpredictable is a harder problem than finding food when you always eat the same thing. But the social answer is equally important. Capuchins live in groups with complex, dynamic social hierarchies. Navigating those hierarchies, managing alliances, tracking social debts, knowing when to cooperate and when to compete, requires exactly the kind of social intelligence that their experiments keep revealing. And here's what the capuchin story illustrates beautifully. Intelligence is not a single thing that some animals have more of. It is a set of cognitive tools that evolve in response to specific problems. The capuchin faced different problems than the chimp, different problems than the gorilla, and evolved different, overlapping, independently developed solutions. The convergence is what's remarkable. That completely separate evolutionary lineages, facing broadly similar challenges of social life and ecological complexity, arrived at broadly similar cognitive destinations. That is not a coincidence. That is evolution telling us something about what intelligence actually is. Okay, so I want to bring this home in a way that I think is worth sitting with for a minute. Everything we've covered today, the tool use, the fairness, the deception, the economic behavior, these are not exotic animal quirks. These are the foundational cognitive and social behaviors that human civilization is built on. We use tools, we have a sense of fairness, we deceive each other for personal gain. We invented money and then immediately started finding ways to game the system. We spend resources to build social relationships and accumulate social power. We have been doing these things for so long, and we are so thoroughly embedded in societies built around them that we tend to assume they are uniquely human, that they emerged with our species, that they are products of our intelligence. The Capuchin monkey, 4 kilograms, living in a South American forest with no civilization, no language in our sense, no cultural institutions of any kind, has independently arrived at versions of all of them. What that tells me is not that capuchins are almost human. What it tells me is that humans are more primate than we usually admit, that the cognitive and social behaviors we consider most distinctively ours have roots that go far deeper than our species, that we did not invent these tendencies. We inherited them, refined them, and built a world around them. And a small monkey in a research lab keeps reminding us of that every time it throws a cucumber at a researcher. The Capuchin monkey breaks the rules. Not because it's trying to, not because it's making some kind of statement, but because the rules of primate society, the ones that say small animals should stay in their lane, that cognitive sophistication scales with body size, that the most interesting minds are the biggest ones. Those rules were never accurate to begin with. What capuchins show us is that intelligence is opportunistic. It emerges wherever the problems are hard enough and the social environment is complex enough to select for it. It doesn't care about body size. It doesn't care about evolutionary lineage. It just solves the problems in front of it with whatever cognitive tools it can develop. And somehow, a 4-kilogram monkey on a completely different continent, on a completely separate evolutionary path, ended up with a mind that looks, in some deeply important ways, like ours. That's not a coincidence. That's the story of intelligence itself. If this video changed how you think about capuchins, or about intelligence in general, I really want to hear about it in the comments. These are the conversations that make this channel worth doing, and if you're not subscribed yet, now is a good time. We go this deep every single week. Stay curious. Stay primal.